Hi everyone, my name is Nicky Mullen and welcome to my webinar called The Magic of Maths, Learning Through Play. Throughout this webinar I am going to talk to you about the journey that I have had from a traditional classroom to one which is more play-based learning. I'm going to talk to you about how important the environment of your classroom is as the third teacher. We will explore the place for games in learning and reinforcing maths concepts, and finally talk about the practicalities of how this fits in with teaching, learning and assessment. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about the journey that I have been on. I started teaching in 2015 as a probationer in East Lothian Council, where I worked in an infant school and I had a primary 2 class. In this classroom, every child had their own seat. The free play opportunities were limited to small windows of time, and quite often they were overlooked when things got busy. So if I had extra things I had to squeeze into my week, then play would be the thing that I decided to get rid of because I didn't see the benefit of it. I had a role play area, a literacy area with a library and water tray, and quite often a sand tray as well, which were put in a rotation. The standard things that you would have in an infant classroom. A really important thing as well is I hated teaching maths. I didn't know how to make it an enjoyable experience. And one of my very first observations as a probationer was actually teaching a seal lesson, and it went disastrously wrong. And from then on, my confidence took a huge dip, and I didn't really know where to go from there. So, what? Throughout my probationer day out, I took the opportunity to observe and collaborate with other staff within my school, and I was also lucky enough to be able to go out and about through the local authority and observe other teachers who my mentor had suggested to me. She was really supportive and realised that I wanted to make changes to the way that I practiced, and she gave me a lot of guidance on how to do this. I had a huge change of mindset as well. I started to see how I could incorporate different things into my maths lessons, including bringing elements of fun into it. So, for example, with one of the teachers that I went to observe, I saw that she included lots of games as part of a teaching carousel. So, for her teaching station, which was there was also seal games to reinforce the concepts that she had been teaching that day, and free play was also part of her carousels as well. I was also reflected a lot on my own childhood. I really enjoyed learning maths at school, and I think a lot of this was down to how I was taught maths actually at home rather than at school. There was a lot of, when I was younger, I used to go and visit my auntie who worked in a shop, and I would always go and see her. And I would play shopkeepers with her, and I would go around with my little basket, and then we would total things up at the till, and she would get me to count out my coins, add them up, give change. I also really enjoyed playing shops and restaurants, and I would always ask my granny to make a price list for me, and I would have to add up the different things on the menu. And I also sat and played card games. A very large portion of my childhood was spent playing Rummy Cub or Old Maid, and I realised actually how beneficial these are in teaching early concepts of maths. When I moved local authority, I stayed within a primary 2 class, but I was able to see other teachers working together across the early and first level stage, and it really gave me an idea of how things operated both in a nursery setting and within primary 1, 2 and 3. I was also lucky enough to be team teaching, which gave me the opportunity to listen and observe to not only my stage partners and the girl that I was team teaching with, but other people within the school as well. There was definitely a culture within that school of being able to go and watch one another in order to improve our own practice. I also trained as a SEAL trainer. This was a huge confidence boost for me as I began to understand really why we teach maths and why it's so important to get the foundations right and how to get the foundations right. And one of the reasons that I did that is because part of the school improvement plan was to improve basic numeracy skills across the school and have a culture of talking about number in primary 4 to 7. And what the school had noticed is that since SEIL had been introduced as a programme, the children who had SEIL from primary one and even in the nursery stages, they had all the basic groundwork and were able to talk a lot about why they're able to do certain number problems. And further up the school, where they hadn't had a SEIL approach early on, were missing some of the foundations. So one of my jobs was to have a look at how we could make numeracy more fun for them and get those necessarily foundations and building blocks in order for them to be able to succeed when they got into first and second year maths at high school. From then on, in 2018 onwards, I changed local authority again, where I had a peripatetic role. This gave me an opportunity to see how play operated in different settings. I was really lucky in that I got to visit a number of different schools where they had a play-based approach, both in nursery and in primary one. And the interesting thing was is that in every single school, play was it was different in every single one of them. I was given the role of introducing more play into primary two in the school that I ended up in, and from there I was able to use that to notice the difference in the children who had originally been part of it was very much a sit down and teach kind of culture, and we were really trying to move away from that. Because the school was trying to change their culture of every child having their own say, almost like a chalk and talk approach, there was a lot of CPD opportunities within the setting based on the school improvement plan to move towards play-based learning. We were lucky enough to have Deirdre Grogan from Strathclyde University spend a little bit of time with us and how we could incorporate more play into our setting. I also visited other schools for inspiration where I was able to see a little bit of the work that they already had in place. So I'm going to talk to you first of all about the environment as a third teacher and why that is so important. An environment conducive to play is essential. It has to be functional but reflective of the child's learning and not overstimulating. I talk about the environment as a third teacher. The first and second teacher are the parents and the teachers, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how the teacher's role is so important here as well. I'm going to explore each of the following and show how I have used these to enhance maths and numeracy. So I'll talk about block play, role play, free flow play, and the loose parts play. So, block play. Block play encourages problem solving, testing theories, creativity, and gives opportunities to extend by adding, there's lots of opportunities to extend the children's thinking by adding and measuring tapes and different sizes of blocks. Now, there are 6 stages to the child's development in block play, and the very first stages you are talking about children who are maybe babies, 1 year old, where they're thinking about measure and comparing the sizes of blocks and exploring the attributes of them. And then when the children get to the 6th stage, which is normally where they would come in about primary 1, primary 2 level, they have a better understanding of positional language, the geometry, the number, and being able to see the relationship between numbers and numerical awareness. They have a more complex understanding of how they work together. So if I am using block play in order to enhance teaching my number work, then I could ask questions such as, give me X number of blocks. So for example, in the top right hand 2 pictures here, these are children where I asked them if they would be able to make me a tower using 10 blocks or 15 blocks. If the children are in the middle of playing, then I would ask them if they can count how many blocks are in their design. If they've got different shapes, I might use questions such as, how many triangles do you have? How many cylinders do you have? How many cuboids do you have? So not only are you getting in that rich discussion about the geometry of the shapes, you're also getting them to add in another dimension of how many, and you're using your one-to-one correspondence. There's also the opportunities for them to count forwards and to count backwards, or for you to model that for them. If I was to use Lego, then I would ask them how many yellow they had, how many blue do they have, how many green do they have, or I could say things such as, oh look, I can see that you have got 3 green, I can see you've got 3 blue, I can see you've got 3 yellow, how many do you have altogether? How do you know? You can also ask them to add on some blocks, you can take blocks away, and you can count with them. With Lego, you're also able to add in things such as patterns, subitizing, and arrays. Now, subitizing is a really important part of the early stages of arithmetic, because it's the first stage before the children are able to count on. So for example, the children, if they're able to subitize successfully, then they can see already, well, that is 9, so I can count on from that particular number. I could then begin to extend their thinking, and so for example, in primary 2, if we were working on the green level of seal, I could start to talk about, how many more will I need to make a tower of, say, 15, or I've sneaked some away for my tower, how many did I take? And then the children have got concrete materials there to be able to help them to visualise that. Within number work, there's 3 really important stages. The first is the children having concrete materials that they can work with. The second is having pictorial examples there, and then the third is them being able to see things in an abstract sense. So this gives them the confidence by being able to have concrete materials in front of them, and it just helps them to visualise. As you can see in the left hand corner, the blocks that we have in our block plate area have lots of dots in them, and basically all this is it helps support the blocks as they're getting stacked. It makes them safer. But for me, this is a great opportunity to talk about rows and columns as you begin to talk about repeated addition and the early stages of multiplication and division. So I would use that to my advantage as well. It also gives you the opportunity to be able to count in 2s, 5s and 10s. And you can, if you didn't have blocks such as these, then you can still do this with Lego. On Lego, obviously, you've got the little bits at the top, and 4s, 2s, 8s, that you could use to talk about adding, repeated addition, or multiplication. The children have so much fun when they're in block play, and they're able to use their imagination. And just by knowing in your head what concept it is that you're trying to teach that day, you're going to be able to work that into conversations that they are having with the children. And you can see within all these pictures, the children are delighted with the things that they've made, and they're really engaged with that learning. And it's a level of engagement that you might not get if you were simply sitting in front of them with counters and saying, oh, I've got 5 counters here, how many more do I need to make 7? Next, thinking about role play. Role play is an area that I would always tend to have within my classroom. It gives you an opportunity to be involved in the play. I think the standard go-to role play area would be a shop, as there would be lots of money opportunities for them to identify coins, add coins together to give change, and be able to by putting the children in both roles, such as the shopkeeper or as the shopper, it gives them different ways that they're able to explore the coins. And the important thing is the questioning that you're doing to support them with their learning and teaching alongside that. So for example, if you were to leave the children to their own devices in the role play area, it's probably unlikely that they would start to talk about, how have I managed to work out the change here, as they would perhaps in a group setting with the teacher. That's why it's really important that you are there to be able to extend their thinking and just see what level they're operating at. It's also ideal for working with children of difficult abilities, because you can pitch your questioning to suit them. here in the top left hand corner, you will see one of the children who actually set up his own role play area during lockdown, where he had his own shop, and he gave prices to all of his items. And he was giving his mum money in order to be able to get his toys. I think it was almost used perhaps as bribery for him to get to do his work. But actually, what we discovered in him setting up this role play area for himself is that he was able to count far beyond what he was ever able to do in the classroom, and just him contextualising that and taking control of his own learning, it really motivated him to take it that one step further. And we were really fortunate that mum was there and talking to him about the learning and taking our advice about how she could take that further for him. Down in the bottom left hand corner, we have our pancake day. I was feeling pretty brave this day when I put out eggs, flour and sugar and got them to make their own pancakes with a recipe that I'd put out. This was a brilliant opportunity for the children to explore the computational side, computational thinking side of things, where they had to follow the instructions, but they were able to measure out, and the children were talking to one another about things that they've made at home, and you had the fine motor opportunities in there with the mixing and the pouring and the kneading, and also the sensory aspect of it. But the children really did have lots and lots of fun measuring out on the scales and in the measuring jug. And at this stage, had it not been for having that role play area, we probably would have just been measuring using non-standard units. A third example of how I have used role play to teach number work would be my dinosaur lab. Now, this is something that had been set up more as a social studies ideal context, and it was working with the children that I was able to work the number work into that. So, for example, they were really interested in fossils, and we had a range of non-fiction books out, and they were trying to put together some of the fossils that we had to work out which dinosaur it was. And one of the children had noticed that some of the bones were missing. So we had a wee look in the textbook and we said, oh, right, well, this dinosaur should have this number of bones in their foot, but we only have this many. Can you work out how many we need to look for, how many are missing? So there were some great numeracy opportunities in there which I hadn't thought of. So really listening to the children, listening to their play, we were able to put that number work in there. Free flow play is where the children are volunteering their play throughout the opportunities that are set up throughout the classroom. This is generally been set up in response to whatever it is that the children have been talking about during their play, and this helps to support their engagement. So in this particular example, they were learning about fairy tales. So in the bottom left-hand corner, the children had been building a new chair for Goldilocks, as she'd broken Baby Bear's chair, and they were determined that they were going to make one that wouldn't break for her, because she'd had a bit of a bad time in the Three Bears house. What they did is all the children were working together to add on different blocks. There was a real opportunity there to ask how many more would you need to add on. I see that you've got less blocks here, you've got more blocks up here. How many more did it take to get to here? And again, they had the concrete materials in front of them that they were able to work out just by me asking those questions. And it wasn't asked in a way that would be invasive of their play. It was working into the conversation that we were having, and the children invited me into their play. They were asking me if I wanted to try out the chair for Goldilocks, which I was very honoured by. And I was just able to ask them different questions to really be able to extend their thinking. IDL is such a powerful way of engaging learners, and it provides such a numeracy rich opportunities for them, for the children to engage in their learning. And by doing this, you're able to set different challenges. So, for example, we were also growing beanstalks, we were measuring footprints, and we were building different structures. In the two pictures on the right hand side, the children were, this was during free flow play, the children were building a new house for the three little pigs. So we were able to start chatting about 3D shapes, nets and structures as they were using Play-Doh. To begin with, it was actually the blue tack of mine that they'd taken and pencils, and they were using the blue tack and pencils to construct these things. So from taking that on board, I was able to go and get them some Play-Doh and lollipop sticks so that they were able to construct these models. And we had a look at how, you know, the cube was made up of lots of squares put together. And they made a weird and wonderful mansion for the three little pigs to live in all together. And you know, there was lots of other opportunities for questioning there, not only from a mathematical point of view about talking about 3D shapes, but you know, asking lots of science and technology based questions in there as well. In the middle, you'll be able to see where we were growing our own beanstalk. We had taken a pumpkin actually, and first of all they decided that they wanted to see if they could grow their own pumpkin or turn it and see if it would turn into a carriage. And then when we got onto the conversation of Jack and the Beanstalk, they decided to grow their own beanstalk as well, and we were counting out how many of the seeds had managed to sprout, and then we took it outside. And when you go outside, there's so many more opportunities out there for learning as well.
Let's go.
Right now,
2, 4,
of treasure do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 13. No, 14 the egg and 15, 16.
Amazing. Those two were hidden. That was sneaky. So this is something that the children
So it looked like we just had 16 and then there was another 2 hidden.
Hey, you mean iPads count as well?
It's easy for me to be able to look back and see what it is that they're doing.
So if you had on another iPad, how much
Obviously
would
here
that
I'm
be?
not able to scrap over asking questions as they're going, but I would revisit this next few days. We have pirate days every week, and it's a great opportunity to develop word problems and problem solving skills.
17, well done.
They already have. The children are much more motivated to take part in these tasks. They will ask what their next challenge is. And when you've got such a rich ideal context, there's so many more opportunities, not even just for primary 1 and for primary 2, but going all the way up to primary 5, 6 and 7 if you really wanted to. So for example, some of the challenges that they have been set, they had to make a flag, and this was based on fractions. They were told that they had to make a flag and it had to have 2 colours, and the 2 colours must be used the same amount, so it had to be in halves. And as a challenge, they also had to make another flag which had 4 colours, which were used an equal amount. They also had to create a pirate hat. They were only given a set of instructions with pictures and sentences on it as to how to construct it, and every single one of the children in the class managed to make a pirate hat. And again, there was lots of fractions involved in there, knowing how to fold the piece of paper, knowing what shape to fold down. They had to make a triangle. I think when you've got ideal context as well, it's a really great way to engage all of the learners. I'm sure everybody has got in their class a learner who maybe doesn't engage quite as much as you want to. And on the video that I'm about to show you, this is a learner who would find it very, very difficult to engage in group work. So it's really important for me to catch him when he is playing and be able to extend his thinking and talk to him about what it is that he is doing.
How many bits of treasure do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4,
13.
No, 14 the egg and 15 sticks.
Amazing. Those two were hidden. That was sneaky.
I put the key safe in there.
So it looked like we just had 16 and then there was another 2 hidden.
Okay, you mean eye patch to count as well?
Yeah.
I want another eye patch so there's to count as well.
So if you had on another eye patch, how much would that be? 17. Well done.
So he's loving the pirates context at the moment, and you know, I've been able to engage him in lots of numeracy lessons just by having the presence of a treasure chest and some treasure and gold and eye patches, which is great for him, and it's quite easy for me to see where his next steps in his learning are, and being able to capture these things on video, it really helps me to reflect as a practitioner about what I need to do differently to support the learners. In the top corner here, you will see the provision that I have set up for the learners to try and just give them a little bit extra to think about and to engage with their learning. So they've got the pirate chest with the sand inside it, and it's got treasure, it's got a catapult within it, and the children were using the catapult, and when I realised that they were looking to see how far they could get it to go, I added in some measuring sticks meter sticks to see if they could measure how far they were able to get their catapult to go across the classroom. And then just as a little enhancement, I had little bones with number sums on them, which I added in, which the children did go over to have a wee look at and explore. And they were asking themselves these number questions that were in there as well. Another context that I have found really useful for teaching maths in was through superheroes, and it actually ended up, it was quite an inadvertent way. I hadn't actually planned on a number lesson that day. The children had been learning about Iron Man, and we were exploring magnets, and it led to an impromptu money lesson. So the children had the magnets, and they were going around to see what things around the classroom were magnetic and not magnetic, and we had also been having a wee think about money as well, and they noticed that some of the coins were magnetic and some of them weren't, and then they noticed that some of the magnets had different strengths. So then they were challenging each other to see how much money their magnet could hold, and then they started to notice the difference in the coins, and that some of the coins were magnetic and some of them weren't. So then they were trying to decipher which ones they could hold and which ones they couldn't. Now, obviously, had I not been there or the learning assistant not been there to prompt questioning, then we wouldn't have been able to extend the learner's thinking. So it's really important that we are there to just get them to think about what it's doing, because otherwise the play, even though it's not meaningless, you just don't have the opportunities there to take it that one step further. And I obviously understand that we're not able to be there all the time and see every different pocket of play, but even 30 seconds, 45 seconds observation could really change the direction that a lesson is going in. Obviously, throughout the year, there's lots of other opportunities to grab hold of that the children love, such as Halloween and Christmas. At Halloween time, I just put out these cups, and this was helping the children to think about their number bonds to 10. They were adding their coins and adding up the cups and they were trying to see how many they could knock over. So here I was able to do a little bit of addition, some subtraction, and missing add-ins, as well as I was able to say, right, okay, you have knocked 3 over, so how many do you have left? If you've got 7, how many more do you need to make 10? And again, the children have got that visual element, that concrete element where they're able to work it out, and it just helps to boost that confidence. At Halloween time, you could have a potions lab, so that you can get lots of measure, volume and capacity in there. You could turn it into a little shop so that they're getting more money opportunities in there to buy their ingredients. And at Christmas time, I always tend to use Elf on the Shelf to send challenges, so you've got lots of high quality assessments in there. For example, on the week leading up to Christmas, we all know how difficult it can be to engage the children at that time in something that is not Santa Claus. They're very excitable. So the elf had set them lots of different challenges, and they had to collect the right amount of food for the reindeer's journey. So in this, we incorporated a lot of measurement, a lot of adding, and a lot of problem solving opportunities, which the children all loved. They all took part in. These lead to a lot of wow and cool moments. So it's nice to see the children having so much fun, and it's so rewarding for you as a practitioner. Moving on to loose parts. Loose parts is one of my favourite things to have within the classroom, and it's also great if you can have them outdoors as well. Now, within our setting at Newtongrange Primary, we have got it's a concrete playground, and I know that this could be quite off-putting for some people having loose parts, because you're a bit worried about, well, what if the children fall and hurt themselves, but it's a great opportunity for the children to be able to risk assess for themselves. Obviously, just now, it can be quite tricky with the need to have to quarantine, but it doesn't mean to say that loose parts don't have to be out. We have managed to work around it this year and having loose parts available for different children. I had decided that I was going to do a block of loose parts play on a Friday after break time, and it meant that they were quarantined and ready for other people to use on the Monday. So in the top left hand corner, you can see that the children are Easter egg rolling. The children were competing against one another to see who could get their eggs to roll the furthest. Now, I had set it up so that they were meant to be doing Easter egg rolling, but certainly the element of adding the meter sticks in, or measuring by using their feet to see how far they could get it to travel, that was all on the children, because they are quite a competitive wee bunch. And it was something that they really enjoyed, and they were then experimenting with their ramps to see, and looking at the angles to see, if it goes higher, will it roll further, and they made quite a lot of shocking discoveries there about things that they thought would happen, didn't really happen. So there's a lot of scientific computational thinking in there as well. Some of the other things that I've went on during loose parts play, you will see that the children have put lots of the pipes together, and what the children were doing is they were trying to get the water to go from one end to the other, and it started off with 2 children trying to get water from one end of the playground to the other, and as they went on, more and more children started to get involved. They were going away, they were getting buckets of water, they were coming back, they were trying to see where the gaps were. So there was great opportunities for measurement in here, and again, it was that problem solving aspect, and developing that resilience, which is so essential in number work. Loose parts play within the classroom. This can be quite off-putting for some people, because they think that it might be something that's really expensive. However, I found that the materials gathered for loose parts, they're pretty much natural, and it's a very cheap way to add play into the classroom, and children can support and gather in the things that they might need, such as pine cones, shells, stones, cork, sticks, and maybe even some pasta. By doing this, you're allowing the children to categorise the items that they've got. You could add information handling into this as you go and collect these things, making a bar chart or a tally mark of all the things that you have managed to collect. And when you've got the loose parts play in the classroom,
they lead to endless opportunities. So recently we had World Earth Day, where we had done a little mini topic in the classroom about World Earth Day, and then the children went off to make their own waterfall, and they used the loose parts play, and they used the Numicon in there, and they were saying, you know, we need a bigger wall for the waterfall, we need more tents, we need more tents. Then there was children going about hunting about to find the Numicon, to see if they could find a 10 block. And I was able to ask questions like, oh, how much have you got there? You've got a 10, you've got another 10, then you've got a 9. How much is that? Oh, 10, 20. Oh, it's 29. So you're able to get the 10s and 1s in there as well. So you're talking, you know, the early stages of the yellow seal in there. They also use these small tiles. They love the shape and the pattern and the tiling, and making all of these different designs. Some of them could spend hours making up these little patterns on the tables. And, you know, it's always heartbreaking at the end of the day when they're saying, oh, you know, it's time to tidy up. But I think it's really important as well for the children to be able to see their work and leave them out. So if they don't want to put them away, I would just leave them. And then the very next day they can come back to it, and then they can add to it or take away or completely change it. There's great opportunities in there as well for me as a teacher of a learning assistant to ask, oh, well, you've put these two together, what kind of shape did that make? Oh, look at these hexagons, what do you notice about them? Will they all fit together? Can you think of anything else where it's made up of lots of hexagons? And then they can say, oh, well, it's a football, it's a beehive. They also use them to make symmetrical pictures, to make comparisons, and to add in a lot of pattern. And they will talk and they will use that language when they're in their play as well. And it's up to me, obviously, to extend their thinking that wee bit further. So it's really important that you have in your head, you know, what it is that you are wanting to teach. And then when you've got these impromptu opportunities that come up, because obviously you don't know what it is that they're going to be making on that day, you can just ask different questions and get them to, well, what would change? What if I added this? Would it be symmetrical or would it not be symmetrical? What would I need to do to this side? What would happen if I did this? What would happen if I did that? So the place for play and reinforcing concepts. Obviously attainment is right at the top of everybody's agenda, always. I think in order for there to be attainment, the children have to be engaged, and there's a very strong correlation between engagement and attainment. The restrictions and difficulties of the last year and the impact that this has had on learners has been really huge. So another aspect of it is the fact that, you know, in order for our learners to be able to go on and succeed, their health and well-being has to be in the right place. So in order to, and by providing these different opportunities for play, we're supporting the learner's well-being, and we're being able to assess where they are and whether or not they're ready to learn. If a child is not ready to learn, then it's going to be very difficult for them to sit down on the carpet and do a standard phonics lesson or a numeracy lesson. And I think it's also important that you think back on your own memorable experiences. For me, all of the experiences that I had at school that I remember were all really fun ones. I think we tend to block out the more traumatic experiences that we've had, and it's not something that we want to relive. So the more fun that you can make maths for children, and the more play that you can incorporate, the more memorable that experience is going to be for them, and the more they're going to be able to grasp onto these different things that they've learned and put them together and use them in new contexts. So obviously there are practicalities to the teaching, learning and assessment part of it. I've already spoken to you quite a bit about the teacher as an observer and joining in with the play. Obviously it's really important for you as a teacher to have lots of fun, for the children to have lots of fun, and it's really, really special when the children start to involve you in their play. Obviously there's a huge curriculum that we have to cover, so for me I try and include numeracy and maths as much as possible into different aspects of the curriculum, especially through IDL and PE opportunities. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about top task, which is the way that I capture their learning so that I'm able to assess and so that I've got evidence, and also looking at Floorbooks and responsive planning. And again, this is just a way for me to evidence what the children have been learning and to inform my planning. So, maths across the curriculum. Learners are naturally quite competitive in my class, so adding numeracy as much as possible allows there to be another dimension added to the lesson. So for example, here I have got a PE lesson where we were practicing our it was target practice that we were doing.
How far
On the
did you
right hand
manage to
side,
throw
I
it?
had set out a
21
number
what?
of hoops,
21
and
bananas?
the children were competing against
21.
one another to see how many they could
Amazing.
get in hoops. And I said, right, okay, well, what about if the hoop closest to you is worth 1 point and the hoop furthest away from you is worth 2 points? If you're throwing your beanbag in here, how many can you score? So then they were starting to add up 2 and 3 numbers. And obviously they were having to rely on one another. These were mixed ability groups. They were supporting one another to work out what their overall score was, and then they started to keep tally marks of how many they were getting. We had to run inside and get pen and paper for them to be able to do that. And that again, adding in the tally marks, that wasn't something that I had maybe initially planned on. In the left here we have got children who were throwing the javelin and they were wanting to see who'd got the furthest. So they were measuring using their footsteps. So let me just show you a quick wee video.
How far did you manage to throw it? 21 what? 21 bananas?
No.
21.
Steps.
Amazing.
So obviously they were playing against one another, seeing how far they could get it. You do sometimes get children that'll say, oh, I managed to throw mine 100 steps. And we could talk about, oh, well, you must have big giant steps. We also were able to talk about, well, if I've got really big feet and I'm measuring, is that fair then, because I will have less footsteps? And then the children were saying, oh, well, maybe next time we should get out the measuring tape. So the children were then problem solving for themselves. They're thinking about what their next step would be to make sure that it was fair. Top tasks. So as I said to you before, top tasks is a way that I observe what the children have learned, what they're able to put into context, and how I can capture what it is that they've been doing, so I've got evidence. So for a numeracy, I tend to do numeracy after break time, and I would tend to have games out linked to whatever concept it was that I was teaching for that day. So I would tend to always have dominoes and card games out, a dartboard out for them to play with. Now sometimes there will be occasions where I've got groups down on the carpet and I will be using these as part of my teaching lessons, because sometimes I don't think it's practical to have it free flow play all the time. Obviously there are outcomes that we have to teach and there are things that we have to do, and sometimes if you've not been able to capture that, if you've not been able to capture a certain aspect of the children's learning, but obviously that is their next steps, then you're going to have to include that some way. So it's about how you make it as fun as possible. So for example, up the top, I have got children who have got shopping basket and they are adding fruit and veg into their shopping basket, and they are adding up how many pieces they can fit into their basket. Obviously, you could do this just through the role play area. You could have a shop and you could be saying, right, okay, here's my shopping list. I need 3 bananas, I need 2 apples, and I need 3 oranges. How many pieces is that all together? And then the children can go away and they can find what it is that they are doing. I spoke to you a little bit before about cards. I think these are a great thing to have in your top task box if you're going to have one. I use them for getting the children to count up in number sequences, for subitizing, for spotting the missing number. In the top right hand corner, I had given the children a pack of cards. I'd taken out the Jack, Queen and King, and they were dealt out, and we dealt out the cards to them, and they had to see who could get their cards in order the fastest. And the first child to have all of their cards away out of their pile was the winner. So really they were problem solving as quick as they can, having the numbers out, seeing which one would go next to see which ones were missing. You could also use the cards for bringing two cards out together and adding them up, as is happening in the bottom corner. Dominoes, again, great for subitizing, good for doubles, good for adding, finding the total value of what is on the dominoes. I think darts as well is really undervalued, and it's a great game to have, especially looking at primary 3, 4 and 5 and going up the school. You can be looking at doubling numbers, tripling numbers, again for down the school, adding 3 numbers together, taking away, starting from 501, throwing the darts and then taking the numbers off to work out what value they've got left, just as in a normal darts game. When you're having games like this, the children become really engaged in what they're trying to do, and they become faster and faster at being able to process and do that mental maths. I think it's a great thing to have within the classroom. And you'll also see here that I've got my wee foam number line in there. So I would have that's something that I could have out all year long. So numeral identification, counting the number of jumps between one number and another. I could add in adding and subtraction number sentences, so they could use a number line to support them with working out adding and subtraction just by working up and down the number line. Now obviously there is a place for written tasks as well, and there will be occasions where I'm not just taking photos of the children and I will have a written task in, but I do still try and keep it as fun as possible for them. Again, here's more examples. I've got Snakes and Ladders, Monopoly and Rummikub out. I do have quite a competitive class. I enjoy playing these games. Rummikub is one of my favourites from when I was younger, but I probably still play it now actually. This is great because you can differentiate it for any child in your class. The children need to be able to identify their numbers. They need to be able to count forwards and backwards. They need to add numbers in a line together. So for example, 1 to 6, 1 to 7, they need to be able to problem solve by adding their tiles in, because the object of the game is to get rid of all their tiles. As you can see, I've got one learner there who is delighted that she won. In order to be able to start the game, they have to be able to add a total of 30 using the tiles that they have got in front of them. Now, obviously, if I was wanting to make it a little bit easier, then I wouldn't expect them to be able to add up to 30, or you can make it slightly trickier. You could say, right, okay, you need to add up to 50 to get your name started. And once you've went over these games with the children, you could put these out just as an enhancement to your to one of your play areas, and the children will go off and they'll play it independently. For example, the children in the bottom right hand corner are playing Snakes and Ladders. This was something that they were doing through their independent time. And this was really supporting their learners with counting forwards and backwards, numeral identification, finding the missing numbers. And I think it's important to stress as well is that the children that are here, like, it's a very mixed ability, but you're extending the thinking of those who maybe wouldn't necessarily be in the same group as some of the others in there. Monopoly as well, as long as the children are able to work together as a team. Monopoly could also work as well. You have got the opportunity for recognising numbers, adding, taking away, and it supports the children being able to share the resources as well as turn taking and developing those all important social skills as well. So I spoke to you before about responsive planning and how important that is, because when you're planning in response to what the children are playing with, you're able to tap into what it is that's interesting them at the moment. So when we were having a little look at, we had a water tray out and we had some of our fruit out from the snack, and the children were exploring sinking and floating, and one of the children made the observation that the heavy stuff sinks and then the light stuff floats. So obviously, me being there, I was able to ask different questions and get them to compare the different objects. So we started off by saying, all right, okay, well, you've got your orange here and your apple here. Which one do you think is going to sink? Which one do you think is going to float? oh, which one do you think's heavier? And then we started measuring them out using cubes, and we couldn't really work it out. So we started off obviously by comparing. Then with the cubes, we couldn't work out which one was heavier, which one was lighter, because they were round about the same. So then we were able to go and get scales and measure it in grams and kilograms to work out which was heavy and which was lighter, and then being able to test that theory of theirs. So there was lots of rich mathematical and scientific vocabulary involved, lots of tests and theories, which is something that, again, it never would have happened had we not been there to sort of extend that thinking for them and get them to do that problem solving. And finally, Floorbooks. This is how I capture what the children have been doing. I've got the iPad out. The children tend to take photos of their own work so that they can upload them to Seesaw, and I generally go around and take photos of what it is that they've been doing, so that we can track our progress throughout the year. And it's really nice for the children to be able to have a wee look at their Floorbooks and look back at their progress from throughout the year. It's a really easy way to capture the children's learning and record their observations that they've made and their insights and how they've interpreted the learning, because quite often the way you have a lesson mapped out in your head might not be how the children take it. It can go in so many different directions. This could be something, one question I've been asked about Floorbooks before was, does it not take an awful lot of time to record all this? But for me, no, it doesn't. What I do is I have got one of the apps where I can get free photos. So I get up to 50 free photos a month. And I just upload these pictures onto the app, and then I send away for my 50 free photos. So all I'm doing is paying for the postage, which is something like £2 a month. So that saves me lots of time rather than having to upload all the pictures, fiddle about with them on Microsoft Word to get them down to the right size, and it means that I get them in colour as well. And the children love being able to see the photographs themselves and see what it is that they've been doing, and they're able to think back about what they were doing on that particular day. I will write things down for them sometimes, and then there will be occasions where I get them to write it down as well. And I have got a Floorbook for IDL, and I've also got a Floorbook for looking at literacy and numeracy as well. So what is the benefit of learning through play, and certainly in terms of maths? Well, within my class at the moment, almost all of my learners in primary 1 have achieved early level. The one child who doesn't, she has got other complex learning needs, which means that she isn't really in a position, she's not ready for that type of learning yet. And I've actually got some children who are now working within the latter stages of first level. I've got one child who is currently working at where some of the primary 3s and 4s are. I mean, when he first came into primary 1, he was nowhere near that level. So, play really, really works for him. Again, almost all the learners in primary 2 are on track to achieve first level, with some predicted to achieve first level by the end of primary 3, if we were to stay on the trajectory that we're on at the moment. And I think probably most importantly of all is the attitude to maths and numeracy. The children love coming to do their number work. They enjoy the fact that it's fun. I think most learners you could go to in my classroom and you can ask them about what it is that they enjoy about maths, and they do tell you that it's fun and that there's lots of different things that they could be learning in that day. And for me, that's the most important and probably the most special part of it. I think it's so important that we're able to instill that attitude in the learners, and that maths is something they're looking forward to doing. One thing that always sits with me is, early on when I started teaching, and I had a wee girl who kept saying that she couldn't do it. I can't do maths, I can't do maths. And when I spoke to mum, she said, oh yeah, she gets that from me because I could never do maths. I was always told I couldn't do maths. And it really stuck with me that if that's what we're telling children, then that is the attitude that they're going to have. Whereas if they go in and they think it's fun and they're going to enjoy it, then that's going to stick with them, and they're going to have a go, and then they're not going to have that closed mindset. So just to conclude, it's really important for us to work with others, collaborate with others, utilise Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram and Magpie ideas from others. a lot of the ideas that I have had have come from working quite closely with other practitioners. I think it's important that you make sure you're well organised and confident in the concept that you're teaching, and think about how you could make a game out of it. It's really easy when you get the hang of it and if you plan ahead. All I do in the morning is I have a wee look to see where each of my learners are within SEIC, and I will try and incorporate that into their learning as much as possible while they are away exploring play, and I will see how I can add that in. Children not only enjoy the learning process, but you have fun too. It supports a positive mindset towards maths and numeracy. And it makes your life easier and your job even more enjoyable than it already is. Teaching is something that I've always wanted to do. And I think when you have got when you're doing something you love and you're having fun while you're doing it, I don't think you can really ask for anything more. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. If you do want to contact me at all, here are my contact details. My email, my Instagram and my Twitter account is there, and I'm happy to pass on any information that I've had, and if you want to hear anything more about a specific aspect of the play that I've spoken about, then please do feel free to get in touch.